Hello there, world history people. Let's all learn about totalitarian dictatorships. This is kind of the setup for World War II. Pretty important part of history. Whole lot to learn about. Let's do it. All right. So there's some pretty good movies and TV series that all kind of cover how totalitarian systems came into being. The Rise of Hitler is this series on YouTube that really discusses all the steps that Hitler took to get into power in Germany. Also, there's this really good series on YouTube called Hitler's Children, and it's just about like these really old people today who are still alive in Germany, and they talk about what life was like growing up where Adolf Hitler was the leader of Germany, and it really gives you a lot of insight over how fascist countries get made. Okay, yeah, Hitler hanging out with the kids, and then there it is, Mare Nostrum, fascists. All right. So, the first part of this presentation, I'm just going to tell you about what all the fascist totalitarian countries have in common. First of all, you got to know what the word totalitarian means. And it's a kind of government that has only one leader. And this one leader makes all the decisions. This one leader has complete control of the country. This is not democracy. This is one person in charge. Some synonyms for the word totalitarian are dictatorship, one-party rule, and tyrannical. There's a lot of people, especially in recent history, that fit this mold, but on this unit, I'm going to talk about Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, and Hirohito. And actually, I already talked about Stalin in the Russian Revolution series, so you should know that he absolutely fits all of the concepts I'm going to talk about in this lecture today. All right, so let's check out some quotes about totalitarian governments. The first people totalitarians destroy or silence are men of ideas and free minds. That is true. First, they came for the communists, but I was not a communist, so I did not speak out. Then they came for the socialists and the trade unionists, but I was not one of them, so I did not speak out. Then they came for the Jews, but I was not Jewish, so I did not speak out. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak out for me. So definitely be wary of these governments. For sure. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And as we'll see in this video series, a whole lot of people did nothing, while these guys came into power and are going to start the biggest war in the history of the world. Okay, so the first thing that all these totalitarian governments have in common is propaganda worshiping the leader. If you look at all three of these propaganda pieces, this one's from China, this one's from North Korea, and this one's from Nazi Germany. They all have the leader in the center of the photo, and there is this emulation that the leader is the sun, the leader is the light guiding the country. And the leader is almost brought to this sort of godlike level amongst the people of their country. So this is something that all totalitarian governments have in common. All right, another thing is religion is rejected by the state. No totalitarian government wants there to be religion. They want religion to be worshiping the leader who's in charge. So these are some Russian propaganda that Stalin made, and it's saying like religious holidays are bad. They just waste our resources, waste our time. And then here's the first human being in outer space. His name is Yuri Gagarin. He was a Soviet citizen. And as soon as he got into outer space, he said, "I see no God up here," which really shows you how they feel that God isn't important in their lives. So that's something all totalitarians have in common. And then I'll zoom in on these other pictures here. So this is another Russian propaganda. It's saying like religion, you're just wasting your time chasing Jesus. You'll never find him. And then here are some Nazis hanging out outside of a church in Germany. And I think this translates to English saying something like, instead of church, come hang out with us. So the Nazis never officially made religion illegal, but I think Hitler intended to do that over time. Okay, so society is totally under the leader's complete control, and other political groups are illegal. If you wanted to start your own political party and run against the guy in charge, you'd probably find yourself in prison, or maybe worse. So, yeah, and I'll zoom in on some of this. Good citizens don't think. Thinking leads to reasoning. Reasoning leads to right and wrong. Wrong leads to revolt. Revolt leads to bad citizens. And that is true. They wanted to kind of mind control their whole country, which is really scary. All right, there's Mussolini smiling to a crowd of a bunch of Italian people. And I already read that bit. And there's Hitler with this huge group of German guys all at his beck and call. Okay, this is probably the most important part of totalitarian governments. Minority ethnic groups are considered scapegoats. They're blamed for all the country's problems. I mean, if the Nazis had any kind of idea as to a problem going on in their society, they would immediately blame the Jews. The Japanese, if they had any problem in their society, they would blame the Koreans, which is probably the hardcore nature of this protest here. So you can just see that everybody has a group that they don't desire and they blame for all the problems rather than looking at maybe some of the deeper problems in their society. So here's a quote by Benito Mussolini, the Italian fascist. When dealing with a race such as Slavic, inferior, and barbarian, we must not pursue the carrot but the stick policy. We should not be afraid of new victims. The Italian border should run across the Brenner Pass, Monte Vecero, and the Dinaric Alps. I would say we can easily sacrifice 500,000 Slavs for 50,000 Italians. They're just doing this math where they just hate other ethnic groups. Okay, and so yeah, this is some French stuff that's really anti-Semitic against Jewish people. This is Russian stuff that's anti-Jewish people. Here's Keep Australia White, and they got the Nazi logo going on there. Oh, goodness. What is this? Attention, this is only for the Italian language. If you don't speak Italian, you gotta leave. And here they are pushing out Jewish people, and that's pretty clear there too. Okay, so in all totalitarian societies, women are delegated to traditional roles. This one does not really apply to Russia. In the Soviet Union, women had basically complete equality with men, but in the Nazi Germany, in fascist Italy, in fascist Japan, women were kind of supposed to do the whole stay at home, take care of the kids, be a housewife sort of thing. And there's a lot of Nazi literature. There's basically like Hitler Girl magazine or something. And in that magazine, they say women, don't start businesses. Don't go to college. You're just supposed to stay at home and take care of the kids. So it's not good for women's rights, these totalitarian governments. Okay, so yep, there's Nazi families right there. Nazi girls. And here's some Italian girls doing the Italian salute thing. And then here's a bunch of Japanese girls holding Nazi flags. Oh, goodness. Okay, and education is always very strictly controlled by society. And in all these cases, education teaches social Darwinism. It teaches that, you kids are kids of this superior racial group, and the whole rest of the world is going to eventually fall under your purview, and you're going to be the master race of humanity. It's a bunch of really racist stuff that gets driven into these kids' heads. And so when these kids eventually grow up and become soldiers in the army, they just, fight on behalf of their leader. So here's the Italian dictator, Mussolini, again, checking out these future soldiers of his, making sure they're learning the right things. You notice how the genders are very isolated from each other, so they even have that going on in school. And it's a very rigid educational structure. Not a lot of critical thinking happens in these societies. Okay, the arts are totally modeled to worship the state. Absolutely no freedom of speech. If you want to be an artist, you got to draw a picture of the leader of your society, being powerful and hardcore. You cannot ever write a song or write a poem that's critical of the person in charge, or else you could be arrested or worse. What I think is interesting is some of these propagandas, they're almost set up the exact same way. I mean, it's like Hitler and Stalin are doing the same physical motion there. Here's a North Korean propaganda. It says something like "Destroy America" right there. Stalin taking care of the kids, and then Nazis feeling like they're in charge. Okay, yep, I already zoomed in on that one. Okay. The last thing that all these societies have in common is they have secret police. These are special police forces that do not have to follow the normal rules of police. These secret police guys, they could just break the door down in your house and come in at 3 a.m. in the morning, take you away and confiscate your property. These guys were above the law. and they kind of served directly for the interest of the leader. And each of these secret police, in Italy, they had this group called the Black Shirts. In Japan, they had the Kempetai, and in Nazi Germany, they had the SS, and or the Gestapo. And these groups were just, they would inflict terror on people. People would be afraid that they could come at them at any time, and it would be really, really hard to hide stuff from these guys when they can, basically, they don't have to follow the laws. They can do anything that the leader wants them to do. Brutal force, for sure. Okay, moving on. All right, so yeah, let's just continue this going with part 2. So now for the rest of this presentation, I'm just going to talk about specific leaders in history. First, I'm going to talk about what happened in Italy, then we'll talk about Nazi Germany, and finally what happened in Japan. So let's talk about what happened in Italy, because this one came first. And it's all about this guy, Benito Mussolini. His nickname is Il Duce, which means the leader in Italian. And let's first learn about his life. So he was the son of a blacksmith in a really small village in northern Italy. He got educated to be an elementary school teacher, and he was an elementary school teacher for part of his life. But being in the classroom really wasn't his total objective. He knew he was a really great speaker, a really great writer. So he joined the army in World War I. And by all accounts, he was actually kind of a cowardly soldier. He said oh, I hurt my leg, I can't go and fight. So he's not a great soldier. But after World War I, he did get involved in politics, and from politics, he will rise the ranks and eventually take over the whole dang country. All right, so here's Mussolini when he was a soldier in World War I. Here he is, kind of a young man. This is one of his political campaigns. It's just his face ominously over this board that says CCCCC, which means, of course, yes in Italian. And then here he is hanging out with his best friend, Hitler. And I'll describe their relationship a little bit. Hitler thought Mussolini was kind of okay, but especially during World War II, Hitler thought Mussolini, his opinions changed, and he was I don't really like you anymore, Mussolini. But Mussolini loved Hitler to the bitter end. He was please be my friend, and it was a little much. Okay, so Mussolini is the guy who creates the concept of fascism. And it's really important you guys know what fascism is. Fascism equals totalitarianism and this phrase, all men are not created equal. So everything that I just said in the first half of this presentation, of course, applies to fascism, but they also add in this racism element. Fascists are always going to see the world in a very racist terminology, and they always have this idea that we are going to dominate the world over everyone else. And the big difference that you all should know is that the Soviet Union was totalitarian, but the Soviet Union was never really racist. The Soviet Union didn't care what your ethnicity is or what your gender is, but fascists most certainly do. And the word fascist comes from this Italian weapon. It's this axe kind of covered in sticks. And yeah, it's from the Roman Empire, and it's a symbol of leadership. So it's saying we'll be leaders of the world. So let's check it out. All right, there's the Italian fascist flag. This was Mussolini's flag. Here's a statue I took a picture of, I think in Cincinnati, and I was oh, that's a fascist axe, leadership. And yeah, fascism is cured by reading, and racism is cured by traveling. I love that quote. That's really great. And then early warning signs of fascism: powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as scapegoats. Yeah, I could read all the rest of this, but this is what we already covered in the first half of the lecture today. All right, so Mussolini promised the Italian people a new era of prosperity. And all around Italy, he built these grand monuments. He talked about bringing back the Roman Empire of old. And he even created this concept called Mare Nostrum, which means our sea. And he's, of course, referring to the Mediterranean Sea, because 3,000 years ago, the Roman Empire controlled all the land around the Mediterranean Sea, and Mussolini said, let's bring it back. Italy's going to go on the offensive. We're going to take over France. We're going to take over Spain. We're going to take over Northern Africa. We're going to take over Turkey. He wanted all this land back for a grand Italian empire. And you would probably be thinking, Mr. Brown, wouldn't France and Spain and all these other countries hear Mussolini talking about this and then be like, wow, Mussolini, we're going to fight you. Like, you're talking a bunch of crap. But the rest of the world didn't. The rest of the world just kind of listened to him spout off these words that Italy was going to take over, and they just didn't take him seriously. And I really wish they did. Okay? And here's a very much younger version of myself when I went to Rome, Italy. I think this was in 2009. And here I am standing in front of one of these buildings that Mussolini built. So, yep, here we go. So yeah, this is Mussolini's dream to bring all this land back for Italy. SPQR, that's the old term for Rome. And now it's with tanks and airplanes. And yep, I already mentioned that one. Okay, so Mussolini was super charismatic. He was a master public speaker. He could get up there and use his big gestures and his big voice and get people really excited. And this is going to be a pretty common theme in all fascist governments, where there's going to be this leader that really inspires people and gets them to follow along with whatever he wants to say. So here's Mussolini speaking it up. He's speaking. He always kind of puffed up his chest and kind of looked up like this. That was kind of something he always did. Okay, people joined fascism in just huge numbers. And eventually, Mussolini was like, okay, I should run for president. But the next election was a couple years away. Mussolini didn't even want to wait that long. So Mussolini called up all his supporters and said, you know what, guys? We're just going to form a mini army, and we're going to march straight into the city of Rome. As soon as his kind of fake military got into Rome, the government decided to quit. And the government just gave Mussolini total control of the country. And the black shirts, those were his thugs. Those will be the guys who become his secret police. And this, oh man, I'll zoom into this. This is pretty crazy. So as soon as Mussolini got in power, they had this big rally. And this was written at the bottom of the rally board. And it translates to Mussolini is always right. Wow, they just really didn't want people to critically think. And here's a quote by Mussolini. Democracy is beautiful in theory. In practice, it is fake. You in America will see that one day. Man, I really hope that doesn't turn out to be true. I think democracy is way better than fascism. But Mussolini is, he took over Italy. We got to learn about him. All right, moving on. Mussolini's always right. Oh, man. Okay, so as soon as Mussolini gets in charge of the country, what does he do? Well, he decides to turn the country into a super capitalist state. And so this is all that kind of laissez-faire capitalism, where there's some people that are super rich and some people that are super poor. And Mussolini just made sure, like, if you're a part of my fascist kind of best friend group, you're going to get all the wealth and all the power you could ever want. But if you don't really follow fascism, if you are not Italian, if you are an immigrant, if you're a person I don't like, well, we're going to make sure you don't have any opportunities in society. So, yeah, it was a really bad system for people who were not full-blooded Italians. Workers were also forbidden to strike, and the military worked closely with business bosses, making sure that the country kept working, even if the working conditions weren't fair or weren't equitable. So, this is a quote by Mussolini as well. Fascism should rightly be called corporatism. It is the merger of corporate and government power. Wow, that's pretty bold. But there's also a whole lot of racism in fascism as well. All right, moving on. So, yep. And then here's Mussolini's summer palace that he built for himself. Oh, goodness. Too much. And most Italians weren't living that great. A lot of people living in pretty terrible conditions. Okay, so he had some pretty hardcore social policies. First one is glorify the military. So the whole society started to get revved up for the military. I mean, he wanted to take over so much of Southern Europe and Northern Africa. He encouraged women to make babies. And he said any woman who had 14 or more kids would get a medal personally delivered by Mussolini. And I know this story. This is a girl whose mother died in childbirth, giving birth to, I think, her 15th or 16th kid. So Mussolini gave that daughter a medal on behalf of her mother. And here's another line he said, people will obey us through fear. We will rule through terror. So if you didn't follow these rules, they're coming for you. They're coming for you hard. All right, Mussolini given a medal, and then this is what those medals actually looked like. Childbearing medals. Wow. Okay, and yes, children were taught all that fascist garbage, value military above all else, restore the Roman Empire, go on the offensive. If you see all these little kids dressed up like soldiers getting ready to go to war, maybe the world should react, kids. I don't know. But the rest of the world didn't react, and it's going to lead us into World War II. Okay, so to start off Italy kind of going on the offensive, Mussolini decides to expand the Italian Empire by attacking the last independent African country in 1935 and 1936. And if you remember from my imperialism unit, the one country in Africa that managed to resist imperialism was Ethiopia. So Italy invades Ethiopia. The Ethiopians put up a really strong fight. They've got machine guns. They've got technology. They're fighting back. But then Mussolini decides to break the Geneva Convention, and he starts using poison gas against the Ethiopians. And the Ethiopians had never, thought about that gas would be used. They thought that it was against international law, but Mussolini didn't care. As a result of especially these chemical weapons, the Ethiopian army crumbles. Mussolini successfully invades Ethiopia, and the League of Nations says they don't like it, but the League of Nations does nothing. Ethiopia becomes a colony of Italy, and for the next 5 or 10 years, Ethiopia is going to provide Italy with more resources it needs to start World War II. Oh, goodness. Okay, so here's the Italian invasion of Ethiopia. They are fighting it out. Italy kind of came from two sides. Here they are using gas masks. You can see this guy's fingers are all messed up. Probably he was exposed to mustard gas. This guy's feet were exposed to mustard gas. And here's Haile Selassie. He's the Ethiopian leader who went all over the world and was like, hey, Italy's attacking us. They're going to attack you guys next. Like, please help us. Please help us fight Italy. And what did the world do? The world did nothing. And it's super duper sad. And here's some of this social Darwinism kind of stuff. This little this Italian kid kind of showing a Ethiopian kid how to paint the colors of Italy over their own country. And then this is also very social Darwinism right here. It's these Ethiopians bowing to Italy, showing that Italy is this superior country. And this is what Mussolini wanted all of his people to see and believe, to restore Italy's glory in the world and to oppress other people around the world. Oh, crap. All right, I'll save this for next time. Peace out.